Okay, so now that we went through all of the different past tenses in German, I think it's time to give us a little breather. In this lesson, I would like to summarize all three past tenses in German one more time to give you a little overview and to make sure that everything is understood so far. So, as we already learned, in German we have three past tenses: the Präteritum, the Perfekt, and the Plusquamperfekt. And while the Präteritum is mainly used in written language, the Perfekt is our go-to past tense in spoken language. That's why the Perfekt is the most used past tense in German. For the Plusquamperfekt, on the other hand, it's different. Here it doesn't matter whether you use written language or spoken language, it simply refers to actions that happen even further in the past than something else. This is rarely the case, that's why this is the least used of all three past tenses. However, it is still important. The English counterparts would be the simple past and the simple past progressive for the Präteritum, the present perfect and the present perfect progressive for the Perfekt, and the past perfect and past perfect progressive for the Plusquamperfekt. Now let's have a look at their formation. The Präteritum is formed by taking the root of the verb, for example geh in gehen or mach in machen, and then adding the so-called Präteritum ending. Those were the endings t, test, t, ten, tet, and ten. And that's basically already it. The problem is, in the Präteritum we have many irregular verbs. But more on that later. The Perfekt, on the other hand, is formed by taking the conjugated version of the Hilfsverb sein or haben and then adding something that is called Partizip 2. So sein and haben are our auxiliary verbs, just like have in have been in English. And most of the time we use haben. We only use sein if the other verb that we use either indicates action or some sort of change. For example, if you take a look at our first example sentence, ich bin gegangen, here we have the verb gehen, to go, and to go definitely is a verb that indicates movement. That's why gehen requires the Hilfsverb sein. And its first person singular is ich bin. I am. Ich bin. Most other verbs, however, like in our second example sentence, sie haben gewonnen, they have won, use the auxiliary verb haben, to have. And the Partizip 2 is formed by taking the root of the verb and adding ge at the front and t at the back. That's how a regular Partizip 2 is formed. So you can see that our two example sentences don't use regular Partizip 2 forms. Because otherwise they would need to end in t, but they end in en. But as I already mentioned, more on that later. Now let's have a look at our final tense, the Plusquamperfekt. It is formed by using the Präteritum forms of sein and haben, our two auxiliary verbs. So, ich war, du warst, sie, es war, wir waren, ihr wart, and sie waren. Or, ich hatte, du hattest, sie, es hatte, wir hatten, ihr hattet, and sie hatten. And then again, we add the Partizip 2. As I already mentioned, it is formed by taking the root of the verb, then adding ge at the front and t at the back. For example, machen would become gemacht, haben would become gehabt, and so on. But there's a problem. All of these three tenses have something in common. They have irregular forms. What do we do if we have one of these? So, as I already mentioned, there is a table in the additional material of most of the lessons where you can find something that is called the three forms of irregular verbs. There you will find, for example, the verb kommen, to come. And the three forms of kommen are kommen, kam, and gekommen. The first form, kommen, is the infinitive. This one is not irregular. But then it gets interesting. Kam, our second form, is the Präteritum form of kommen. And as you can already see, it's an irregular form. Kam. So what the table shows us is the first person singular of the Präteritum form. Ich kam. What we now need to do is adapt it to whatever person we need. For example, you came would be du kamst. We would just need to add the ending st. Du kamst. And so on. And our third form is our Partizip 2. Gekommen. So we can also find all of the irregular Partizip 2 forms here in this table. The third form of the irregular verbs is always the Partizip 2. And as you can see, often the exception is that the ending is not a t, but an en. And that can also be seen in our example sentences. Ich bin gegangen, Sie haben gewonnen. Those are all examples for irregular Partizip 2 forms. And that's basically it. That's all you need to know about the past tenses in German. 1, they are only half of the amount of the past tenses that we have in English, so 3 instead of 6. 2, the perfect is the most used one and it's used in spoken language, while the Präteritum is mainly used in written language, and the Plusquamperfekt is only used for actions that happen even further in the past than something else. And 3, their formation is actually pretty close to English, but there is a difference, because German verbs need to be conjugated, just like sein and haben, our auxiliary verbs need to be conjugated. And then finally, 4th, there are exceptions. Many exceptions. And you can find them in the table about the 3 forms of irregular verbs. But if you know them, everything else is actually fairly easy. And that's it. Those are all of the past tenses in German. And I want to tell you a little secret. The past tenses are actually by far the most difficult tenses in German. When we're now getting to the future tenses, you will see that those are much easier. So if there is something that you should need to invest time in, it's definitely the past tenses, because the past tenses are the most difficult thing in German when it comes to tenses. You will find more exercises on the 3 past tenses in our exercise section. But for now, let's move on to the final group of tenses, the future tenses. In our next lesson, I will show you what future tenses there are in German and how they are formed. Bis gleich, see you soon.